Hey everyone, I'm Tristan, and here we have with us Reuben, the author of this blog post on the Our Revolution Los Angeles blog. You can type in Our Revolution LA blog on Google, and it should be the first link that pops up. It is titled, It's Not What You've Done, It's What You're Doing Right Now. So, Reuben, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, of course. My name is Reuben Vargas. I live out here in Chino, and I was a Bernie victory captain for about 6, 7 months. And a victory captain is someone who leads a super volunteer, somebody who leads volunteer events like canvases and phone banking in but is still a volunteer. Um, I wrote this article earlier this month after I found a video from former TYT contributor Jordan Charlton, in which he tried to discuss what he thought was the truth about Bernie Sanders. And it just got under my skin when he kept on saying over and over again, "Who the fuck do you think you are?" in regards to speaking out about Bernie and what he's done since he capitulated to Joe Biden.
Yeah. So for people who don't know, Jordan Charlatan has a YouTube channel called Status Coup. Um, and here's the video right here. We're not gonna play it because it's like a 20-minute long rant. Um, yeah, and yeah, Ruben's a victory captain, and that was part of the Students for Bernie program, correct?
um, the Students for Bernie was a separate program. The Victory Captain program was its own thing. Like I said, we were supposed to lead events, but in a volunteer capacity, basically.
Okay, yeah, because I did the Students for Bernie program when they first
Uh,
started, so I remember them doing the victory captains a little later on. So, do you want to talk about maybe any of your volunteer experience with the Bernie campaign, or do you want to just get right into the article?
I think it's important to describe my experiences as a Victory Captain,
All right, go
because
for it, brother.
that's going to give context. So I can only speak for myself and what I went through. There's been a lot of chatter of from former volunteers about that they experienced pushback or systemic corruption within the Bernie Sanders campaign, um, either directly from figures like from Shakir or other
Jeff
members of the
Weaver.
campaign. Jeff Weaver, yeah, he's a big one. As for me, the big thing that I had going against me is that my events down here in the Chino, Ontario area were starved. Like, I didn't get a whole lot of help from the local campaign office, which was in Riverside. Like, um, my events weren't promoted. I'd be lucky if I got like two volunteers to show up for any of my events, and I hosted two events every Saturday and Sunday. Um, I actually called the campaign office in Riverside to kind of express my concern, and nothing came of it. Actually, in fact, they were supposed to open up an office in Ontario. That fell through, and instead they opened up an office in Pomona. And like I said, my area was just getting started. We got no real coverage, and that's the context why I wrote this article, because Bernie's campaign was not done in the spirit of not me, us. He hired people like Faiz Shakur, Jeff Weaver, and other members who were in it for only their own gain. So to that end, it was no surprise to me that Bernie eventually capitulated to Joe Biden, because members like Weaver and Shakur spoke into his ear and told him, "Hey, we lost out here on Super Tuesday, and now we got to team up with who I consider the single most craven Democratic candidate of my lifetime."
All right, cool. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of that systemic corruption within the Bernie campaign, especially with all those rumors floating around.
Right.
especially with Faye Shakir's unprecedented actions as a campaign manager.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so um, what exactly do you want to relay to all of the viewers from your article that we have here?
I titled it, "It's not what you've done, it's what you're doing right now," because I've adopted this attitude towards anyone running for office. Like, I demand two things: consistency and conviction. Conviction is having belief in the face of the insurmountable odds, and conviction is acting them through. Um, from Bernie, I know that he has all this legacy of being a progressive champion of the exploit here in this country, the poor, brown people, and the LGBTQ community. But his recent actions have undermined all of that. Not voting at all on the FBI surveillance bill. Telling his surrogates directly, hey, if you criticize any candidates, disciplinary actions will be taken. Negotiating, insultingly so, with Joe Biden to lower the age of Medicare from 65 to 55. And this was right after he ran a campaign on Medicare for all. Like, everything that Bernie has done since has ultimately undermined what his campaign was supposed to be, this massive collectivist progressive movement, basically. And to people who still might have who might still support Bernie or might have goodwill towards him, I would hope that they realize that he was never dedicated to the cause like I was or they might be. And the sooner that we sever from him, the sooner that we kind of we stop this hagiography of him, the sooner we can move on. If it's one thing that I think is undermining any sort of real leftist change, it's that we tend to turn individuals into heroes. It's that individualist that American exceptionalism, that individualism that motivates a lot of what we do as Americans. But the sooner that we realize that we only have ourselves, we don't need individuals, we only have ourselves, and we need to start leading ourselves, the sooner we can get some kind of real systematic change going, basically.
All right, so do you think if Bernie Sanders ran as a presidential nominee for a third People's Party in 2020, and that third party was already established, do you think Bernie Sanders would be behaving the same as he is after his suspension?
I think so. I think so. Like, everything that it's not just what he's done since capitulating to Joe Biden. It was things like, again, hiring Shakir and Weaver, who turned out to be, with some of the most regressive organizations in American politics, and have since gone on to enrich themselves, basically. Also, Chuck Rocha, who was a union embezzler, so he had it in him to where it's like, I got to hire people who are only in it themselves and not really committed to not me, us. And on top of that, there was the loyalty pledge. He swore up and down, I'm going to support the eventual Dem nominee. And of course, the fact that he still views Joe Biden, who, as I said before, is probably the most craven Democratic candidate of my lifetime. Bernie views him as a friend, basically. And as far as I'm concerned, Joe Biden is an enemy of the working class, of the 99%, and anybody who would see him as a friend is, by proxy, our enemy.
Yeah, definitely. Because if you look at the Democratic Party platform, everything that comes out of Joe Biden's mouth is literally does not align with the Democratic Party platform.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So do you wanna talk about anything else in terms of Jordan from Status Quo, his epic rants on Bernie being a sellout?
You know, I've got no ill will towards Jordan. Like, I respect the work that he did during the 2016 election, especially covering the Flint water crisis when few people were. You know,
Yeah.
I
He's a
respect.
good journalist for sure. But
He
yeah,
is
this rant was pretty controversial in the leftist
exactly like,
circles.
you know. So as you can tell, I'm a I'm a huge Seahawks fan. I'm huge into football, and it's one thing that I've learned being a sports fan is that, you know, if you're the head coach, you are responsible for the outcome of the game. You know, if your team's blown out, it's your fault as the head coach. You know, if your team didn't execute well, it's your fault as the head coach. That's why you have the job, basically. And I view Bernie as essentially the head coach of his campaign. Anything that happens within the campaign, anything that was to come of it was his responsibility, basically. So to act as if, you know, that he's above reproach, I believe is asinine, is incredibly ludicrous, and it's incredibly regressive too. Because if we don't hold our leaders to task, if we don't hold them responsible for what's under their watch, then we're not going to get anywhere, basically.
Yeah, I definitely agree. That's why I'm I'm totally 100% on board with the movement for a People's Party, because
Okay.
once we do create the People's Party, we will be able to hold them accountable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, personally, I think it's ridiculous because the DNC can make the rules and break the rules with
Mm-hmm.
all like willingly, which doesn't make sense because the Democratic Party is literally essential to the survival and the operation of a two-party democracy. So it doesn't make sense how it is constitutional for them to be able to break their own rules. Um, because essentially they can suppress the vote, and when they do that, it can't technically be unconstitutional because they're a private organization. But they're the second major party that literally is necessary for our two-party democracy to function correctly. But yeah. So what other frustrations do you have about Joe Biden? What do you think Joe Biden needs to promise to us, the Bernie supporters, to get our vote? Because it really seems like he hasn't promised anything. But to be
Mm-hmm.
fair, he hasn't promised anything his entire campaign this cycle. So it's like his first promises to people. What do you think those need to be?
To be perfectly clear, I don't trust Joe Biden at all.
Yeah, I'm not
I
voting for him unless he
exactly,
like
exactly.
gives us concrete proof that there will be a voice in
Well,
the room.
well, see, you know, Joe Biden is like, he's practically my dad's. Well, not my. He's my grandpa's age, basically.
Yeah,
When
he's
you're that
78.
exactly when you're that old, when you're that set in the ways, you're not going to change. And another thing that I want to make clear is that, you know, personally speaking, I remember 2013. I remember when the Obama administration was deporting people left and right.
Oh yeah, me
And
too.
yeah, and I live back then, you know, where I was living up the street, um, customs would have raids up in the apartment complex up the street from where I live. My parents, they naturalized only within the past couple of years, but it became a very real fear of mine that they could have gotten swept up for whatever reason. And Joe Biden was the vice president under that administration that deported more people than anybody else, deported more migrants than any other previous administration. So I know for a fact that he he's utterly corrupt, that he would rather brutalize brown people like me than offer any sort of systematic change, any sort of or fulfill our material needs. So I don't trust him in the first place. I don't plan on voting for him. And to be perfectly honest, I have a gut feeling that he's going to lose, and his loss is going to signal the death of the Democratic Party as we know it.
Well, yeah, when the Democratic Party early on in the primary, it was leaked that they were talking amongst each other, the Democratic Party leaders, and that they came to an agreement that they would risk irreversible party damage if it meant essentially taking the nomination away from Bernie Sanders right
Hmm.
from under his nose. And if everyone can't see that the party damage is clearly being done, and because the Bernie camp is becoming extremely polarized between the two camps of vote for Biden or don't vote for Biden. So
Right.
so it just kind of shows that, you know, there's some people who are basically, I guess you could say,
Conflicted.
conflicted, as well as they are just satisfied. They're not willing to fight for a proportional representation type of democracy, which is more
Yeah.
democratic and free than a two-party democracy. Um,
Um.
it- Go for it. Go for it.
After Bernie capitulated to Biden, I threw out everything that had his name on it. Like, I threw out my T-shirt, my hat, my little lanyard that I had. I even peeled off the bumper stickers off my car. To those
Yeah, I
who
almost
might,
threw away my poster. Almost.
to those who still feel conflicted to this day over, over what Bernie's doing and over voting for Joe Biden or not, I just want to make it perfectly clear. Like, Bernie has aligned himself with the enemy. He's aligned himself with a candidate and with interests that run directly against what he set up his campaign to be. And I would encourage anyone who still might like Bernie Sanders, I would encourage them to, to wake up, basically, to realize that he was never dedicated to the cause in the first place, and we should. He's, as far as I'm concerned, Bernie is deserving of nothing but our disdain, our frustration, and and our vitriol. Because when you betray a cause as important as not me, us, then you were never in it in the first place. And anything short of, like I said, disdain is only going to help their interests grow.
Yeah, well, I personally think that we need to, through the coalition that is being formed and that is rapidly growing right now,
Mm-hmm.
uh, by the Movement for People's Party, I think it's really important for all of us Bernie supporters to coalesce, as well as all of the staff and volunteers for Bernie to coalesce and
Right.
just send like a public message saying that we need Bernie to join our party. Because I mean, I personally still believe in Bernie. I
Okay.
mean, he stayed true through two election cycles, but I mean, he's an old man. He's real tired, and he campaigns harder than any politician I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
Like,
Um.
it just I feel like he's just not fighting hard enough, because I mean the COVID quarantine, the whole COVID crisis,
Mm-hmm.
literally all the parameters were perfectly in place for Medicare for all to be enacted and for Bernie's entire platform to be as popularized as possible. Yet at the beginning of this quarantine is essentially when he suspended his campaign. Like, I think like a week
Yeah.
or two after the quarantine was federally mandated or put into place. But
And, and to that, like, if Bernie could have easily went third party right on the spot, like, there would be no need for people putting themselves in danger of exposure for the Democratic primary if he decided, no, I'm not going to go through the Democratic Party. I'm going to go third party, basically.
yeah,
Now,
he's one of only two senators that are independents. So I mean,
right?
if and he's been running as independent for who knows how long. So like, he's already proved that you don't even have to be part of a third party. You can literally just be independent and still win office.
Yeah. So, as far as I'm, like, personally, I hope that I've made it aware that I really don't trust Bernie at all. And this goes for any of his former surrogates who have endorsed Biden. The squad, AOC, Ilhan Omar, and Rashida Tlaib. They've they've
Yeah, they bent
they,
the knee
yeah,
for
they did.
sure.
They bent the knee, and they bent the knee. So I don't think that I don't think they can't be. I feel that they can't be trusted. That they fully align themselves with interests that would oppose us, basically.
Yeah, I mean that that's why we need to start a new party, because if you think about it, there's two majority parties in
Hmm.
Congress. There's Republicans and Democrats. So if one of them has the majority, then no matter what, anyone who doesn't bend the knee to one of those parties is going to have a bad time in Congress, no
Yeah,
matter what.
exactly.
So basically, it's better to run third party, because then we'll take away power from the Democrats, and the Republicans could have the majority, but they could have the majority for like one election cycle, and that could be those 2 years could be enough time for people to be so unhappy that they start voting for the third party candidates to basically take that second majority and replace the Democratic Party as the second majority party in the two party system. Because no matter what, if the Democrats have the majority, anyone who opposes them is going to have a bad time. If the Republicans have a majority, anyone who opposes them is going to have a bad time. We're going to get the back committee assignments and be excluded from everything and be threatened with primary challenges. Um, Reuben, what happened? Looks like we lost Reuben. Give me 1 sec. I'll get him back right now. If anything, I'll just cut the video, but I probably won't. But yeah, there's a lot of people who are very irritated, um, and very definitely it's very the Bernie camp is very polarized for sure. Um, like there are people like if you want to like classify it, there's Shank Uyghurs and Kyle Kalinski's. Shank Uyghur is a staunch supporter of damage control, and Kyle Kalinske is a staunch supporter of vote your conscience. I mean, the point of voting is to vote for who represents you. So if no one represents you in the election, then they're not obligated to your votes. That's as simple as it can get. Like this damage control BS is just an excuse to continue letting the Democratic Party essentially make the rules violate every voter law, because they have the ability to, because organizations uh, can be classified as one single private citizen and have all the same rights as that one private citizen. And it doesn't make sense because there's a two-party system. If the party is literally mandatory for the survival of the two-party system, then they shouldn't be allowed to suppress voter uh, votes, essentially, and they shouldn't be allowed to violate any voting laws, because like there's Code Pink and the Gray Zone News Network. They were trying to launch a campaign to get the OES to bring in emergency election monitors, and essentially, um, that's because the DNC was suppressing the vote, and so yeah, it's ridiculous because the the UN and the OAS have called on election fraud on elections for much less bad voter suppression tactics.
Um,
All right,
hey,
welcome back, Ruben.
sorry about that. My phone, it got a little too hot in my car. My phone overheated. I apologize.
No worries. I was just speaking to the audience real quick.
Okay.
But anyways, we'll go for another few minutes. If you want, you can just say your final thoughts. You can say anything you want anyone to know. any last final sentiments you have, or anything you want to tell Bernie supporters, whatever you want to say right now, just go for it, brother.
Yeah. So, to my fellow burners, to my former volunteers, victory captains, anyone who still feels conflicted over Bernie, I want to urge you to realize that I want to urge you to realize that Bernie was never in it as much as we were, and that if we are to establish any sort of true collectivist movement, a movement that benefits the working class, brown people, and LGBTQ community, we have to realize that I would urge them to start severing from Bernie. Bernie isn't the answer. I really don't think he was the answer in the first place after recent events. And I would urge them to instead focus all their efforts into local and statewide actions. Join your local Our Revolution chapter, join a union, join whatever collectivist and any leftist organization that's in your area, and get mobilizing. Because progressive politics have failed at the nationwide level, and if we have any hope of carrying the spirit of not me us, it has to be done at the local and state level.
Yeah, I think we should definitely urge everybody who is unsatisfied to join the Movement for a People's Party.
Yeah.
And if anyone who is watching this is not part of the Movement for a People's Party, if you're interested, you can go to their website. But we already have a lot of people signed on, like Nina Turner. Dr. Cornel West, I have heard, is on board. Nina Turner is actually having she's going to be a guest speaker on the Movement for a People's Party National Call today. But yeah, if you submit the volunteer form, you'll be put into the Slack within the next day or two through an email. So it's definitely important to do that because, again, the only reason third parties are not viable is because all the people who think they're not viable are the ones who refuse to join, and the people that are required to join to make it viable. So if you have doubts, just don't have doubts, because when you have doubts, that is essentially that is what allows this two-party system to remain in place and for the people to have zero power and representation. And we need to replace them. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for coming on, Reuben. Hope you're not too hot in that car. But all right. So
next time I'll do it somewhere cooler.
Yeah.